Seoul was drowning in rain that evening, the kind of rain that seemed to wash the city of all its noise, its glimmer, its vanity. The neon lights from the streets below flickered against the glass walls of Café La Clarté, where everything smelled faintly of roasted beans and melancholy. The hour was close to 4, and the café was nearly empty. Only the low hum of soft jazz filled the air, the kind that made time move slower. At a corner table by the window, a man sat quietly, wearing a black coat that blended almost too perfectly with the dim surroundings. His face, familiar yet distant, a reflection of the rain-streaked glass, a ghost of someone the world used to know. Kang, the actor whose silence had lasted longer than most careers in the entertainment world. He lifted his coffee, steam rising between his fingers, and smiled faintly when he noticed the journalist walking toward him. "It's been a while, hasn't it?" His voice was low, hoarse, like someone unused to speaking much. For a moment, it was as if no years had passed at all. Yet the weight behind his eyes said otherwise. Years of absence. 3 years since his name had last appeared in any headline. Since fans stopped waiting outside studios. Since every trace of him seemed to fade like an echo swallowed by time. When the silence first began. Theories, endless ones. Some said he left the country to study art in France. Others claimed he was battling exhaustion. That he had been broken by the relentless machinery of fame. But to those who watched more closely, there was another possibility. Whispered and never confirmed, Kim Yoo-jung. Their story began quietly, almost accidentally. In 2018, both were cast in a drama that would later become a cultural sensation. Behind the camera, they were professionals. On screen, they were electric. Viewers spoke of chemistry so real it blurred fiction and reality. Every behind-the-scenes clip told the same story, the shy glances, the shared laughter, the way his eyes seemed to soften when she entered a room. Of course, the tabloids feasted on it. Headlines screamed about a hidden romance. Fan forums dissected every smile, every word. Yet when Kang was asked about her in interviews, he always smiled and said nothing. "She's someone I respect," he once replied, before quickly steering the conversation elsewhere. It was a non-answer, but it was enough to feed the rumor mills. Then came the silence. In 2021, after his last promotional tour, Kang disappeared from the public eye. No new projects. No press appearances. Even his agency seemed uncertain about his whereabouts. A single fan photo surfaced months later, a blurry shot of him sitting alone by the Seine River in Paris. Sketchbook in hand. The caption read simply, "He looked peaceful." Meanwhile, Kim Yoo-jung continued to rise, new roles, new endorsements, new accolades. She never mentioned him, not once. But every time her name came up, so did his. As if the two were still connected, orbiting each other's lives from opposite sides of the sky. The journalist remembered all of this as she sat down across from him in La Clarté. It felt surreal, the man who had vanished now sitting right there, real, breathing, stirring his coffee. There were no cameras, no staff, no rehearsed lines. He had insisted on that. No PR people. No agenda. He'd said in his message. Just a conversation. Outside, the rain grew heavier, the glass trembling under each drop. Inside, the air tightened with the weight of unspoken things. For a while, neither spoke. Kang seemed lost in his own thoughts, his gaze fixed on the gray sky beyond the window. When he finally broke the silence, his words came like a sigh. "I used to think silence could protect me," he said quietly. "But silence can also be a cage." The journalist hesitated, unsure how far to go. "Was it about her?" she asked finally. His eyes shifted, not surprised, not defensive, just tired. He smiled faintly. It was always about her. Those words hung in the air like smoke, fragile and irreversible. The rain outside softened, almost as if the world was listening. He looked down, fingers tracing the rim of his cup. "We worked together," he continued. "It was simple at first. She was bright. So bright it made everything around her feel alive. I didn't even realize it then, that I was drawn to that light." He paused, then added almost inaudibly, "Maybe I still am." The journalist scribbled a note. Though she already knew these weren't words to print lightly. They were too raw, too human. She remembered stories from the old production staff, How Kim Yoo-jung once waited outside the set in the rain because Song Kang had forgotten his umbrella. How he'd shown up to every rehearsal even when he wasn't in the scene, just to watch her perform. They were the kind of details no one confirmed, but everyone believed. Why now? She asked. After all these years. Song Kang didn't answer immediately. He leaned back, eyes on the window, watching the blurred city lights flicker like memories. Because I realized something, he said slowly. No matter how long I stayed silent, I would still talk. So maybe, it's time to hear it from me. The journalist felt the tension shift, something fragile breaking open. It wasn't just a conversation anymore, it was a confession waiting to be born. As the evening darkened, the cafe emptied until only the sound of rain and jazz remained. Outside, the world continued as usual, cars rushing through puddles, umbrellas passing like fleeting ghosts. But inside, the air was charged, alive. The years of speculation, denial, and longing had finally led to this moment. Up again, and for the first time that night, there was something unguarded in his expression. Do you know what the hardest part of silence is? He asked softly. It's that people start rewriting your story for you. Start forgetting what was real. The journalist nodded. Then tell me, she said. What was real? His lips parted, but the words didn't come right away. Instead, he gave a faint, bittersweet smile. Her laughter. He whispered finally. That was real. The rain began to ease. The light in the cafe dimmed as the evening melted into night. And though he hadn't said everything yet clear, this was only the beginning. Tomorrow, the world would hear his truth. But tonight, under the gentle drizzle in a quiet corner of Hanam-dong, Song Kang had already broken his silence. It had thinned into a mist by the time the clock struck 6. Lights of Hanam-dong shimmered beyond the fogged windows, painting the cafe in shades of gold and gray. Song Kang hadn't moved much since he began speaking. Something in him had changed, the stiffness in his shoulders had melted, and the way he exhaled now felt lighter, almost resigned. The journalist could feel the weight of the moment. The air between them was dense with memory, as though years of silence had been distilled into this single evening. The world outside went on unaware, but here, this quiet corner of Seoul, one man was finally opening the door he had locked so long ago. He looked out the window. Reflection ghosted by the raindrops. People think silence is peaceful, he said. But it's loud inside your head. It doesn't let you rest. He turned to face her, eyes steady. I thought staying quiet would protect her. If I disappeared, she could lie freely, without my shadow. Without the rumors. The journalist hesitated before asking, and did it work? He laughed softly, a sound that carried both relief and sorrow. No. Because love doesn't disappear just because you stop talking about it. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something small, a folded piece of paper, worn and creased at the edges. Folded it slowly, his hands trembling slightly. This, he said, was the last thing she gave me. The paper was faintly yellowed, the handwriting delicate and neat. Be kind to yourself. She wrote that after we wrapped filming, he continued. It was raining that day too. She slipped it into my script when I wasn't looking. I didn't even notice until I got home. He smiled faintly, but his eyes glistened. I kept it all these years. Every flight, every hotel, every city. Whenever I doubted myself, I'd read it again. Somehow, it always felt like she was there. For a long while, he said nothing. Only the hum of the refrigerator filled the silence, and the faint sound of someone washing cups behind the counter. I wanted to tell her, he said at last. So many times. Every time I saw her, she seemed brighter. She was doing so well. And I thought, if I told her what I felt, I might ruin that. He looked down. I didn't want to be her burden. Alice leaned forward, her voice soft but unwavering. So you left. He nodded. I thought if I disappeared, people would stop talking. That maybe she'd be free. A bitter smile touched his lips. But instead, kept talking, about me. About us. Only now. It was all fiction. I became a rumor instead of a person. He paused, his hands clasped tightly together. That's what I regret the most, he said quietly. That I loved her. But that I didn't have the courage to say it when it mattered. Outside, the rain stopped completely. The sound of traffic returned. blending with the faint music playing from the cafe's speakers, a slow piano melody. Haunting yet tender. Almost deliberate. As if the universe itself had decided to listen. The journalist finally asked a question that lingered in everyone's mind. So why now? Song Kang? Why speak after all these years? He looked up, and for the first time, his expression was clear, no longer guarded. No longer uncertain. Time doesn't erase truth, he said. It only buries it under fear. He took a deep breath. And I'm tired of being afraid. Leaned back, his gaze distant. As if revisiting a memory too painful to touch. We met again a few months ago, he said finally. At a small exhibition in Insadong. Expect her to be there. She looked exactly the same, calm, graceful, glowing. She saw me, and for a moment. Like nothing had changed. What did she say? She smiled, his voice trembled slightly. And she said. You look like you've forgiven yourself. The journalist froze. Unsure what to write next. He continued. His tone lower now. Wasn't a confession, not really. But maybe it was enough. Sometimes you don't need words to understand what someone means. He glanced down at his empty cup. Then toward the door. Well, the rain had left a shimmering trail on the tiles. That day, he said softly. I realized that love doesn't always need to end with someone walking away. Sometimes. It just changes shape. It becomes quieter. Gentler, but it's still there. The journalist didn't interrupt. His words filled the air like fog. For years, headlines had painted him as distant, cold, reachable. But here, he was just a man, human, flawed, honest. He looked back at her. His voice barely above a whisper. Write about it. He said. All of it. I'm not afraid anymore. Are you sure? He smiled faintly. If I stayed silent any longer, it would be like denying that part of me ever existed. As they stood to leave, the cafe's lights dimmed. Outside, the streets shimmered with reflections of headlights and puddles. In the night carried the scent of fresh rain. Song Kang paused at the doorway, looking up at the clearing sky. She once told me, he said, half to himself, that art is about telling the truth, even when it hurts. I guess this is my art. The journalist watched him disappear into the street, the rain now only a memory. The city pulsing softly under the glow of its lights. At night, the article went live under the title. After years of silence, Song Kang breaks his silence about his love for Kim Yoo-jung. Within hours, the world reacted. Fans flooded social media, some in tears, others in disbelief. He really said it. After all this time, maybe love never really ends. Warning, Kim Yoo-jung's agency had declined to comment. She herself remained silent. Her personal account. One photo appeared, a single shot of Seoul's skyline after the rain. Caption simply, be kind to yourself. The post went viral within minutes. And just like that, silence spoke louder than words. As dawn broke over the Han River, the city awoke to a different kind of light. The story that had lived in rumor and shadow for years had finally been told, not through scandal, but through truth. Somewhere in the quiet corners of Seoul, a man who had once vanished sat by his window. The sky turned gold. His phone buzzed with endless notifications. But he didn't check them. He simply smiled, eyes soft. Seeing something only he could see. Maybe it was her. Maybe it was the memory of her laughter echoing faintly in his mind. Or maybe it was peace, the kind that comes only after you've spoken every word you were afraid to say. For years, he had believed silence was strength. He knew the truth. Sometimes, silence is just love waiting for the courage to be heard.